He is the only former Waffen-SS soldier buried at Arlington National Cemetery. That sentence should bother you. It should make you uncomfortable. It should make you want to know how a man who wore the uniform of Hitler's elite ended up beneath the same white headstones as the men who defeated Hitler's empire. The answer is simpler and stranger than anything you'd expect. Lordy Torny didn't fight for Germany because he believed in Nazi ideology. He didn't fight for America because he loved democracy. He didn't fight for Finland because he was told to. He fought for all three because they were all fighting the same enemy, the Soviet Union. That was it. That was the thread that ran through his entire life, from the frozen forests of Finland to the Eastern Front to the jungles of Vietnam. Every flag he wore, every army he joined, every name he used was in service of one unbreakable obsession: fighting the Soviets and anyone who stood with them. His Finnish name was Lordi Alan Torni. His American name was Larry Allen Thorne. The Soviets put a bounty on his head. The Finns gave him their highest medal. The Germans gave him their trust. The Americans gave him the Green Beret. And in the end, the jungle took him and held him for 34 years before giving him back. This is the story of the soldier of three armies. Lordi Torni was born on May 28, 1919, in Viipuri, a city on the Karelian Isthmus that was then part of Finland and is now part of Russia. His father, Jalmari, was a ship captain. His mother, Rosa, raised the children. Lordi grew up athletic, competitive, and restless. A skier, a boxer, and a boy who seemed built for physical confrontation. At 19, he enlisted in the Finnish army. It was 1938. Europe was on the edge. And Finland, a small, independent nation wedged between Scandinavia and the Soviet Union, was directly in Stalin's path. On November 30th, 1939, 500,000 Soviet soldiers crossed the Finnish border. The Winter War had begun. Our audience knows this war. They watched Simo Häyhä kill 500 men in the snow with iron sights. Torni was fighting the same war, on the same frozen front, against the same enemy. He was 20 years old, a junior officer, leading ski patrols behind Soviet lines in temperatures that killed men faster than bullets. He was promoted to second lieutenant by the time the Winter War ended in March 1940. Finland had held. The Soviets had paid a catastrophic price. But the peace was a lie. Everyone knew the Soviets would come back. They did. In June 1941, the Continuation War began, Finland's second fight against the Soviet Union, this time alongside Germany. And this is where Torni became a legend. In 1943, the Finnish army created an elite reconnaissance unit and gave it to Torni. It was called Detachment Torni, informally named after its commander, which tells you everything about how the Finns regarded him. The unit specialized in deep penetration raids behind Soviet lines. They skied in. They destroyed supply depots, communication lines, and command posts. They killed. And they disappeared back into the forest before the Soviets could react. Among Torni's soldiers was a young man named Mauno Koivisto. Decades later, Koivisto would become the president of Finland. He said of Torni, "As a leader, he was liked. He did not ask anyone to do something he did not do himself. He carried his own load, marched at the lead, and was one of us." The Soviets put a bounty of 3 million Finnish marks on Torni's head. He was wounded multiple times, once when he skied into a mine. He kept fighting. He received the Mannerheim Cross, Finland's equivalent of the Medal of Honor, on July 9, 1944. Then, in September 1944, Finland signed an armistice with the Soviet Union. The war was over. The Finnish army was demobilized. Torni was unemployed. But the Soviets were still fighting, and Lordy Torny was not done fighting the Soviets. This is the chapter that requires honesty. In January 1945, Torny left Finland for Germany. He received saboteur training with the Waffen-SS. The plan was to organize a Finnish resistance movement in case the Soviet Union occupied Finland, which many Finns believed was inevitable. He was not an ideological Nazi. He did not join the SS because he believed in racial supremacy or the Third Reich's vision for Europe. He joined because the Germans were the only people still fighting the Soviets, and fighting the Soviets was the only thing Lordy Torny knew how to do. That context matters, but it doesn't erase the uniform. He wore the SS insignia. He served in a unit that operated under the command structure of one of the most criminal organizations in history. The fact that he fought alongside that organization for his own reasons doesn't change the fact that he fought alongside it. Both things are true. When the war ended, Turdny surrendered to British forces near Schwerin, Germany. He escaped from a British POW camp and made his way back to Finland. But Finland was no longer safe. The Soviets were pressuring the Finnish government to arrest former German collaborators. Turdny was arrested, tried for treason, and sentenced to 6 years in prison. He escaped from prison, was recaptured, was pardoned by the President of Finland in December 1948. But Finland was finished for him. The country he had bled for couldn't protect him anymore. The Soviets wanted him. If he stayed, he would eventually be handed over. So Lauri Turdny decided to disappear. In 1950, Turdny fled Finland. He crossed the border into Sweden. From Stockholm, he made his way onto a cargo ship bound for South America. In the Gulf of Mexico, near Mobile, Alabama, he jumped overboard and swam to shore. He was now a political refugee in the United States, with no papers, no money, and no English. He made his way to Brooklyn, New York, where a small community of Finnish immigrants took him in. He worked as a carpenter. He worked as a cleaner. He waited. A Finnish Veterans Association president named Paavo Fleming recognized Turdny's military potential and brought his case to the attention of William Wild Bill Donovan, the legendary former head of the Office of Strategic Services, the wartime intelligence agency that preceded the CIA. Donovan, now a lawyer, agreed to represent Turdny. Through an act of Congress, Turdny was granted a residence permit. In 1954, at the age of 35, former Finnish captain Lauri Turdny enlisted in the United States Army as Private Larry Thorne. He went through basic training alongside 19-year-olds who had no idea that the quiet older man in their platoon had already fought 2 wars and been decorated by 2 nations. He was selected for the Special Forces almost immediately. The Army was building something new. Small, elite units trained in guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and unconventional operations behind enemy lines. They needed men who had already done those things. Larry Thorne had been doing them since 1939. He became a Green Beret. He taught skiing, survival, mountaineering, and guerrilla tactics at Fort Bragg. He was commissioned as an officer. He led a mission in Iran to recover bodies and classified material from a crashed C-130 on a mountain that previous teams had failed to reach. He became a legend in the Special Forces community. And then Vietnam called. By 1963, the United States was deepening its involvement in Vietnam. The North Vietnamese were running men and supplies down the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Laos and Cambodia into the south. The Americans needed Special Forces teams to locate and disrupt those supply lines. Small units operating deep in enemy territory, behind the lines, doing exactly what Detachment Turdny had done in the Finnish forests 20 years earlier. Larry Thorne deployed to Vietnam with MACV-SOG, Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. The name was deliberately bland. The operations were anything but. MACV-SOG ran the most classified, most dangerous missions of the entire war. Thorne earned the Bronze Star for heroism. He earned 5 Purple Hearts for combat wounds. Each wound entitled him to leave the front and return to the rear. Each time, he refused. He requested command of a forward operating base instead. He was 46 years old. He had been fighting since he was 20. 3 flags, 3 wars, the same enemy in different uniforms. Communism, whether it wore Soviet gray or Vietnamese green. On October 18, 1965, 3 King B helicopters lifted off on a covert reconnaissance mission near the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos. Larry Thorne was aboard one of them. The helicopters flew low over the jungle canopy. Another aircraft monitoring their radio frequency noticed that Thorne's helicopter made a sudden 180-degree turn. Then, it vanished. 56 search and rescue missions were launched. They found nothing. No wreckage, no signal, no bodies. The jungle had swallowed the helicopter whole. Larry Thorne was listed as missing in action. A year later, he was officially declared dead. He was posthumously promoted to Major and awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Rumors circulated for decades. Some believed he'd been captured. Some believed the North Vietnamese had turned him over to the Soviets, the enemy he'd been fighting since 1939, finally getting their hands on the man with the bounty on his head. Some believed he was still alive somewhere in the jungle, fighting a war that nobody else remembered. In 1999, 34 years after the crash, a joint Finnish-American recovery team found the wreckage on a mountainside in Laos. Dental records confirmed the remains. Lauri Turdni, Larry Thorne, was coming home. On June 26, 2003, Major Larry Allen Thorne was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Section 60. Headstone 8136. He was interred alongside 3 South Vietnamese Air Force crew members who had died with him that day. Finnish diplomats attended the ceremony. American Special Forces soldiers stood honor guard. 2 nations, paying respects to a man who had served under 3 flags and died under the 3rd. There is a building named after him at Fort Carson, Colorado, the Larry Thorne headquarters of the 10th Special Forces Group. Every year, the United States Army Special Forces awards the Larry Thorne Award to the best Special Forces detachment in the entire Army. In Finland, the Infantry Museum in Mikkeli has an exhibit dedicated to him. The survivors and families of Detachment Torni formed a tradition guild in his honor. He was voted the most courageous Mannerheim Cross recipient in Finnish military history. 3 flags, 3 wars, 17 decorations from 3 nations, the Mannerheim Cross, the Iron Cross, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Bronze Star, 5 Purple Hearts, and 1 headstone at Arlington in a row of American dead bearing a name that wasn't the one he was born with. Lauri Torni became Larry Thorne because the world kept telling him the fight was over, and he kept finding a new flag to fight it under. Not for ideology, not for empire, not for glory. For one thing, the belief that the enemy he'd faced in the frozen forests of Finland at 20 years old was the same enemy he faced in the jungles of Vietnam at 46. He never stopped fighting. The jungle had to stop him.